So he's called Brett Robert James. He was called Robert after me dad and James after me granda.
This is Sandra Adams. She's talking to me from her home in Gateshead in the north of England. From the moment she joins our video call, she looks fragile. The weight of the world is on her, and I can see it. And it wasn't long before tears started to fall.
He was beautiful. He had loads of jet black hair. I was 20 when I had him. And he was just adored by everybody. My parents adored him.
She's talking about her son, Brett Dryden. He'd been raised by his mum, his stepdad Rob, and he had a younger sister called Shannon.
I split up with Brett's dad when I was expecting Brett. Brett's dad was never in his life. So I met Rob when Brett was 4. And I fell pregnant really quickly with Shannon, which was a shock to my system. And then we had Shannon a year later. And Rob took on the role as dad to Brett. And they were really close. Loved being out and about. He's very outdoorsy. He used to go to competitions, doing skating and that. He worked at Nissan for a little while, and he wasn't happy. It wasn't for him. And then he came to us with the idea of moving to Spain to start a business, and I was really worried. I was I really don't want you to do this, because we were really close. But yeah, he moved there and he made loads of friends, and he made it his home. He just loved it.
Despite never having been to Spain before, Brett moved to Mojaca with his then girlfriend and daughter Charlie 5 years ago. His mission was to open a legal cannabis club. Brett was highly passionate about the medicinal benefits that cannabis could offer. In the UK, whilst cannabis is illegal, there are many products that contain CBD oil readily available in high street stores. Some people can also get cannabis products on prescription in the UK too. But in Spain, cannabis use and possession are decriminalised for personal use, but remain illegal for trade and commercial purposes. So cannabis clubs are a common way for users to use cannabis legally. Brett opened the Doghouse in Mojaca, and it was instantly a hit. Mojaca is an upcoming area on the east coast of Spain. Online reviews described his club as cool, friendly and chilled out. And Sandra says one of the things Brett was most proud of was the community the club created. Sandra, can you tell me a bit about Brett's club? Because I know you said you'd visited it over the years. What did you make of it?
Yeah, it was a private members cannabis club. But it wasn't just a place where people went to smoke cannabis. It was like a little community he made. It was amazing. He had so many friends, and it was his passion, and he was very passionate about the medical side of cannabis, because the year before last I got diagnosed with womb cancer. And I had to have a full hysterectomy, and Brett was me rocking. He's like, "Ma'am, you need to get some oil, and you need to be taking that because it has great benefits with cancer." So I did anyway. I mean, I'm lucky. I'm cancer free now. But he was so passionate about the medical side of it, not just smoking it.
But on the 21st of July, 2024. Brett's stepfather Rob received a phone call from one of Brett's colleagues in Spain.
I was driving home from work. I worked up a concert, and I was driving home, and I was actually on the phone to my daughter, and he's keep trying to ring Rob because it's going through to my car, and I'm like, "Shannon, I'm going to have to go. Your dad's on the phone." And then I answered. He was just hysterical, saying that Brett was dead and he'd been found in his apartment. Yeah, which was just my worst nightmare. It's my own personal living hell. And I got home, and I said to him, "No, it's not true. It can't be right." And he was like, yeah. So we booked the flights that night to fly out the following morning. I just had to go to be there. I just wanted to see me boy. Yeah. I just wanted him to know that I was there.
Oh, Sandra. I can't begin to imagine the pain that you felt at the time. I know how strong that mother and son bond is, and it sounds as though you really had a very special relationship. What were you told in that initial phone call? Because I know that you said to me previously that Brett was a fit and healthy 35-year-old. So I'm guessing that this call was completely unexpected in every single way.
Brett would normally go back down to the club for closing time to make sure it was all locked up and everything was fine, and he didn't turn up. So they went looking for him, and he has like a key box outside of his door, and they went in and found Brett. The dog was lying on the sofa and undisturbed, and Brett was lying in between the kitchen and the lounge bit. There was blood all over the house, and they initially said that it was a violent murder.
The colleague who found Brett called the emergency services and then called Brett's family. The police arrived along with an ambulance, but Brett had already passed away. One thing was clear from looking at him. Brett had a serious wound on his head.
It was on his right side, the right side of his forehead. It was about 5 centimetres long and about 4 to 5 centimetres wide.
And of course, this opens up so many questions amongst the shock that you're all going through, especially as you'd mentioned to me previously that you'd actually spoken to Brett that day, hadn't you?
I spoke to him on the morning, I spoke to him at 11 o'clock on the morning. Me and my other granddaughter, Naya, we were on Morrison's, and he adored her, Naya. He used to call her Naughty Naya, and we were on FaceTime. I think it was about 11:30ish, and he was in really good spirits. He looked well, because we were going over to visit with my sister from Germany, and he was happy and well. I don't know what I thought. I was just numb. All I knew was that, my son was dead.
Sandra flew out to Spain. She said the journey was a complete blur, and when she arrived, she went and met some of Brett's friends. The police had taped off his home, but she found out that 2 of his friends had been allowed to walk through his house to fetch his dog. They said they'd walked through it twice, and through their grief and shock, Sandra and Rob knew this shouldn't have happened, as this can contaminate a crime scene. But what was even more shocking was the very distinct lack of communication between the Spanish police and Brett's parents. In fact, Sandra had to chase the police for an appointment to meet them.
We had to ring and ring and ring to get an appointment to see them. They never came to seek us out. Then when I went in, and me and Rob sat down, and he went, there was a lady and a guy, police officer, and she went, it was a pulmonary embolism. I went, a pulmonary embolism? She was like, yeah, terrible accident.
Sandra and Rob were confused. The police had initially said that it had been a violent death. They'd even said that to a journalist who had written an article in a Spanish publication stating that fact. Brett's colleague had seen blood all over the walls, and the police were treating it as a crime scene. But now they were saying, in layman's terms, that he'd died from a blood clot. They were confused, and it was 3 days before they were allowed to see their son's body.
As soon as I saw him, I knew. As soon as I saw the wound on his head, I knew. I just knew that it wasn't. I knew it wasn't that. And they tried. They tried to rush with to have a cremation. And we were going to go ahead with that. up until I saw the wound on Brett's head, and I was like, I'm taking him home. We got advised by one of Brett's friends. His mum is a criminal lawyer. She's retired now, and she said, Sandra, take your boy home. You need a second autopsy. And then my husband, he went before me to see him. He went to check his body for any other marks. And as a father, he should never have had to do that. And he went to the crime scene. He's got pictures of the crime scene. I haven't seen them. I don't want to see them. But yeah, he struggles with that daily. And, you know, it's something he had to do for him, I suppose, to make sure we got justice for Brett.
No father should ever have to do that, and no mother should ever have to live through the anguish that Sandra has. So there they were. The police were telling them that their son had died from a blood clot, as per the results of an autopsy. The police tried to assist them in getting Brett cremated, but they decided they wanted a second autopsy performed in England. With so many questions, Sandra wondered about Brett's phone. Could it offer up any clues? And this is where things take a very strange turn.
And at this point, they hadn't mentioned the wound on his forehead. Like, the police hadn't mentioned that to her. And I had said, do you have his phone? Yeah. They rang one of Brett's friends and said, have you got the code for Brett's phone? I went, it'll be Charlie's date of birth. No, it's a Samsung phone. I went, no, he hasn't got a Samsung phone. He's got an iPhone. He's just getting it because he'd only been back in Spain 2 days because he'd been home visiting. And I said, he's got an iPhone. And I was like, oh, where's his MacBook? Have they taken that and all? And as it turned out, his MacBook was at the club. And his phone was pinging. Like, I found his MacBook. And I went on his MacBook because it was linked to his iPhone. And it had I Find My iPhone. And it was pinging. Like, they turned his phone on more than once. And it was given as the location of where his phone was in Beira. It is about 20 minutes from Brett's. And I told them where the phone was pinging. Yeah, we know. I thought, well, how do you know? His phone's still out there. And it wasn't until I noticed that his phone was gone and his car key was gone. And it turned out they didn't have his glasses or his wallet. That we kicked up a fuss and said, look, that's not natural causes.
Brett's iPhone is a massive piece of evidence in this case. To summarise, the police had told Sandra and Rob that they had Brett's phone, which they said was a Samsung. But Brett had an iPhone, and the iPhone was the device being picked up on his MacBook via his Find My Phone app. Sandra told the police about his iPhone, and they did download the data from the MacBook. But Sandra says the police haven't made any attempts to find his phone. The MacBook was taken out in Sandra's name, so she gave it to one of Brett's closest friends, and he often checks the Find My iPhone app from Spain to see if he can see if the phone's been turned on. And incredibly, sometimes it is. It turns on for a moment in a random location near to Mohacker, and then is switched back off. The location varies every time. Brett's wallet and his new designer sunglasses have never been found, though at first the police told Sandra that they had them, but this turned out to be false. Brett's car key was found in his car outside his property, and the car door was left wide open. Another key piece of evidence was some CCTV footage from the night Brett died, but the police didn't obtain this footage. It was obtained by Rob, Brett's stepfather.
And then my husband went door to door around the back, knocking on people's doors for footage because they didn't bother the backside. They had footage of 3 men running from Brett's property.
The CCTV that came from one of Brett's neighbours showed the area around the back of Brett's home, and it saw 3 men running away. Around 10 past 10 UK time, so just after 11 p.m. in Spain, Sandra received a phone call from Brett's phone. This is the iPhone, the one linked to the number that she knew he had. He may have had a Samsung as an additional phone, but nobody seemed to know about that. Sandra answered the phone. She heard it connect, but nobody spoke. And then it hung up.
So obviously I'm like, oh, and I picked it up and I'm like, hello. And there was somebody there, but nobody spoke. And I told them all of this. And then when I told Brett, the guy who was running Brett's club at the time, Yash, I told him this and he said, oh yeah, the police accidentally rang you. And I thought, that's a bit strange. And I know, and Brett was meeting somebody at his house. That I do know because he was on the phone to, there's a Yash and there's an Ash. So he was on the phone to, I think it was Ash, and he said, I've got to go, they're here. And then hung up. And that was the last time anybody ever spoke to Brett or saw him alive.
So the big question here is, how could the police have accidentally called Sandra? Because they had a different phone, not the iPhone that was linked to his number, the one that keeps pinging up all over Spain, the one that all his family and friends used to contact him. It didn't make any sense. The most likely scenario here is that whoever had been in Brett's home that day had taken his phone. Why they called Sandra remains a mystery. So now, Sandra, I guess, the most important thing here is finding out who Brett was going to be meeting. Have you had any leads on that information at all? Who was coming round to his house on the day that he died?
But I do believe, right, that he knew who was coming. He would never have anybody at his house that he didn't know. That I do know. And for the dog not to be distressed, I do believe that the dog also knew them. And I do believe in my heart that Brett would have told somebody who he was meeting. So I know somebody out there, somebody in Brett's circle knows who Brett was meeting.
Whilst this was going on, Sandra and Rob were given the go-ahead to bring Brett's body back to the UK. It cost them over £7,000. Because he died in suspicious circumstances, the UK government paid for a second autopsy to be done.
They carried out the post-mortem in Newcastle and they done x-rays and everything, and they couldn't find a cause of death. So they have took small tissue samples of all his organs, and they said that could take up to a year for that to come back. So we're still waiting on that. I had an email, an inbox week before last from somebody who knew Brett. He's a professor in medicine in York and Edinburgh, I think. And he sent us a message and he went, if Brett had a pulmonary embolism, he'd have thrombosis on his lungs. And on his death certificate, it doesn't state because he asked us to send him the death certificate, so I sent him it. And it doesn't state a cause of death. All it says on his death certificate is where he died and the time he died. It doesn't say where he's passed off. So there's nothing on his death certificate to say how he's died. And what he said was, if Brett had been hit on the head, then that could have caused Brett to have a blood clot, because there was lots of blood. Like, he'd been all over the house, because there was handprints all over the walls in blood.
This, of course, raises two conflicting points. There was no conclusion to say that he'd died from a blood clot, but also no conclusion to say that he'd died from the head wound. This post-mortem was conducted last summer, and Brett's family are desperately hoping that the testing of the samples from his organs can give a further indication as to how he died. Sandra, did Brett have any pre-existing medical conditions? I know we said before that he was fit and healthy, but was there anything he'd suffered with in the past, or any medical conditions that he was managing at all?
No, he was fitting well. He was like always out on his bike. He was like at the boxing. He was always out. He was so fitting well. We'd just been at Disneyland Paris in the February with his daughter for her birthday. So yeah, I would never really spend loads of time with him because like he was always busy. So we took me and him took all the kids to Disneyland Paris, which was amazing. And then me and Rob went away in the May, and he come to stay here. Which was lovely, and I got to spend more time with him than what I'd normally get to do, which was nice.
I'm so glad that you have those memories to look back on, Sandra. They must be so precious to you and his daughter and the rest of your family now. Sandra told me that the police continue to ignore her. They speak to the British consulate in Spain, who they say has been incredibly helpful and gives them updates when the police do respond to him. But Sandra said that she and her family can't keep waiting. They need to be proactive. So she's booked a flight back to Spain.
I'm going out there on the 8th of April. There's about 12 of us going. They're going to be following it through. We're going to go through, and I'm going to drop flyers when I go through in April. And we've got T-shirts and everything printed. Just want to raise awareness of Brett's death, because a lot of people, because initially it was put in the papers in Spain that it was a pulmonary, initially it said that it was a violent death. Then that was quickly retracted, and the following day it said that it was a tragic accident and he died of a pulmonary embolism. So not everybody knew up until it's just gone crazy in the papers. And so now a lot of people in the Hacker Player now know that Brett was murdered. And I've had quite a lot of messages of support. So yeah, just to raise awareness and to get justice, you know. They need to stand up. The Spanish authorities need to stand up and be counted and do their job. Brett's birthday on the 11th. So I'm going to go and spend it with his friends and his dog, but I'm taking Charlie, and I'm going to scatter some ashes. They're his favourite place.
I can imagine that every single person listening to this just feels the enormity of your loss. And it's so clear how much Brett meant to you and so many other people. And whilst I know this podcast and many of the things that follow won't solve Brett's murder, it will keep his name on their lips, in their minds. They will know who Brett Dryden was. And this is something that people can listen to in order to find out more about the circumstances surrounding his death. So you don't have to keep saying it time and time again. Can I ask you, how is your granddaughter doing, Sandra?
Oh, she talks about him all the time, and it just breaks me heart. She done a book at school, and it was like published, and then Brett was like in his castle with his wings, and it was just, yeah. But she's a happy little girl. She's doing really well. She'll say, like, me daddy's in heaven, and she's got her daddy's stamina and his personality.
It must be lovely to see those parts of your son in his daughter, and I'm so glad that you have such a lovely relationship with her too. So I know you have a theory, and Sandra, the floor is yours for whatever you want to say.
I believe that one of Brett's friends and somebody in his circle knows something. And I do know that 100%.
To not jeopardise any future investigation, I won't, of course, say any names here. Sandra said that when the police initially said Brett's death was a violent murder, They said he was likely struck by an axe or a hatchet. Sandra has since learnt that a business rival of Brett's collects axes. The police are aware of this information. Sandra believes that the Spanish police are protecting people and covering up Brett's death to protect tourism. Sandra also told me that someone with a medical background told her that a head wound or a fall can release a blood clot, which can then go on to be fatal and picked up in autopsies. I spoke to my brother, who's a consultant doctor, and I also cross-referenced this in medical research papers that I found online. And whilst this can happen, it usually takes days rather than hours for a pulmonary embolism to occur, though it is a possibility. Sandra, when it comes to the investigation, as a family of a Brit who has been killed abroad, what do you want to say about the way the current systems in Spain and the UK are, I guess, in terms of effectiveness, when dealing with serious investigations like your son's?
Oh, it needs a massive overhaul. They do nothing. They need to be supportive. They need to be in contact with the family. They need to update them, and mostly they need to give a shit, because they actually don't give a shit. They don't care less. And it's hot as in my heart, right? I probably know I'm never going to get justice for my boy, but I will make sure that nobody else has to go through what we're going through. And now Charlie, like 6 years old without her daddy, it's just heartbreaking. And he adored her, and she adored him. They just need to stand up and be counted. They need to not brush it under the carpet because of tourism. And that's exactly what it is. And we've had no help, no support from the British. Nothing, no. Nothing at all. We've just been left to get on with it, basically. I'm not going to go away. If it's the last thing I do before I die, I will fight for justice for my son.